should return to come and examine precisely what has happened. This morning we had occasion, the two ministers and the Deputy President and myself, to listen to the management and to the board, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And we heard them explain and give us full explanations of how we got where we are. And they detailed to us some of the things that led to the breakdowns, and amongst other things they cited the rain that had led to the coal getting clogged up in the system, and they also spoke about the tripping that the system also experienced, and it was a combination of a number of events that led to the loss of so much of generation. Of course, they also spent quite a bit of time detailing to us the challenge that our country faces with regard to the age of the fleet that we have. On average, many of our generators, our power stations rather, are 37 years old on an average basis, with some of them being as old as 55 years and 52. In the case of Komati, 55, and in case of Kandem, also near there. And the new ones are also giving us enormous challenges. Kusile and Medupi are also giving us challenges, and I even commented that a few weeks ago I went to launch Unit 2 of Medupi, and the whole country felt that we had now seen the last of load shedding. And lo and behold, load shedding then visited us once again, which showed that our system is unreliable, is unpredictable for all the reasons that I have cited. But what has also come out as a great concern is that there has been a measure of sabotage that has led to the loss of, during this period, of 2,000 megawatts, where someone in the Eskom system disconnected one of the instruments that finally led to one of the boilers tripping and us losing as much as 2,000, I think it was 2 boilers. Now, another problem that we have had is cable theft. Much as it did not really lead to the load shedding that we've had, but it has had the effect also where people have stolen cable, and some of them have even declined or collapsed, rather, pylons that have caused problems to the system. Now, our own assessment of all these explanations that we were given, we felt that management, in the course of this recent load shedding, yes, did do their best to respond and to restore the system to being somewhat stable, and we think that they've acted correctly. But at the same time, we had a sense that they have not acted with the urgency that is required. They need to be much more agile, and they need to underpin what they do with greater urgency and be able to anticipate some of these breakages that happen. And of course, one of the things that we observed is that the maintenance process of our fleet is rather slow, and it is not as deep as it should be, because maintenance is one of the key problems that faces us, particularly in view of the fact that we are dealing with an aged fleet. We therefore need to be more proactive when it comes to the maintenance of the system. We also felt that there needed to be more accountability at the management level. More accountability is required so that there should not be blame shifting. People need to own up when they have not done what is necessary, what they needed to do. So we want management to be much more proactive. And we then discussed a number of solutions that will give rise to how we restore the stability of the system. We felt that we need to have an emergency recovery plan, that is going to make sure that we get rid of load shedding, and management has given us an assurance that they are trying to stabilize the system and get more and more of the megawatts that we have lost to be restored. And they have given us the assurance that from the 17th of December right through to the 13th of January, we should not be in a position to have any form of load shedding. And going right through to March, they will be seeking to do everything they can to restore the stability of the network. And I have instructed all managers and executives that all leave is cancelled. No one goes on leave. If we are to have the system restored to stability, all leave from now on until January is cancelled. All executives must remain in place, and all key managers must remain in place to make sure that we do not have load shedding. We must also investigate the sabotage. I've directed that the sabotage acts must be investigated, and they must immediately work with the South African Police Service and our intelligence service as well to find out exactly how anyone within Eskom could have disconnected the instrument that has led to the loss of 2,000 megawatts. Details of that can easily be given by the chairperson and the interim group executive, Mr. Jabu Mabuza. Also said that we want security to be increased with immediate effect so that we have the whole electricity system under constant security surveillance so that no one ever gets an opportunity to embark on acts of sabotage like we have had now. The financial position of Eskom needs to be looked at very, very, very closely, and these are the directives that I have given to the management team. And we have said to the board that we want the board to continue with their work of restoring and strengthening governance within Eskom. They have done a good job in as far as restoring governance, particularly getting rid of the corruption that had prevailed during the period of state capture, and they've now embarked on initiatives to recover some of the money that was stolen, and we've said that they must continue with the governance processes. But we've also said that we want the board to rigorously enforce accountability by all. The executives, the group executives must be accountable, the managers must be accountable, and everyone in Eskom must be accountable. And we want a new culture to be inculcated within Eskom. Some of the proposals that management put forward to us as members of cabinet is that they would like to have increased capacity of about 5,000 megawatts if we are to have the system properly stabilized. This will give them an opportunity to maintain the power stations that need maintenance, and if they can get the capacity to have 5,000 megawatts. And some of the ideas that were put on the table is possibly to have floating generators that can come and provide that. That could be very expensive, but it's something that is going to be examined, to be looked at. They also propose that we should look at self-generation, that self-generation would help to relieve the pressure on the system as a whole. And we have said that we will take this matter to Cabinet on Friday. Minister of Public Enterprises and Minister of Minerals and Energy will be presenting a proposal to Cabinet so that we can deal with this matter. These are requests that are being made by Eskom so that we can help to stabilize the system. The system, yes, is under pressure, but what we have been assured of by the management is that they are going to stabilize the system, embark on this recovery plan, which we've directed them to embark on, and that between the 17th of December, leading into January, and even beyond that, as we are working on all the requests that they've made, we will be able to have no load shedding during that period. Now, we believe that through all this, we will be able, one, to have management being accountable. We expect management to now redouble their efforts to deliver on this. The Minister of Public Enterprises and the Minister of Minerals and Energy are going to be on hand on a continuous basis to manage this process, to ensure that management and the board do keep to the plans that are going to be now unfolded, particularly the emergency recovery plan that management is going to unfold. And we believe that with this, we will be able to assure the people of South Africa that, yes, it will not be a dark Christmas. It will be a Christmas where, as management has promised us, where there will be lights and where we will not be in darkness. Thank you very much. Okay, you want me to stay here?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take one round of 3 questions. If necessary, we'll come back for a next one. We'll be very happy if we keep it to 1. Sir, you're number 1. Samkelo, you're number 2. Kanita, you're number 3. I'll come back on yourself. In that order, please.
President Terence Creamer of Engineering News here. Have you been disappointed, given that on the 18th of October, the Integrated Resource Plan was announced? Then it was said that there was 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts of gap that needed to be filled. You say today it's now 5,000 that needs to be filled to give the space. That there's been so little action in trying to get, for instance, the small-scale better generators into the system as self-generation, as you mentioned, as well as to close the gaps through utility plants. And how now will this emergency plan evolve? Will it evolve with Eskom leading it, or will it evolve with DMRE and RPPO office leading it? Thank you.
Samkelo Masago from ENCA. Mr. President, since you say that the Eskom board has done well, particularly when it comes to governance, can you say that the Eskom board has done well when it comes to energy generation? It's the second time that this board, since 2018 January, when you announced it, that there's been load shedding. Is Jabu Mabuza and the Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, failing the nation when it comes to energy generation since they took over as this Eskom leadership? Secondly, when will the government that you are leading take responsibility for the shenanigans of energy generation in this country, as opposed to blaming it to the corruption and the state capture cabal that was in charge of the country and Eskom at the time. What efforts can you say, or wins, that your team has led in Eskom since you took over as the President of the Republic of South Africa? And then lastly, Mr. President, when will you take decisive action as the leader of this country against those who are failing us and failing to lead and make sure there's proper energy generation? And did any NGO prompt you this time around to come back into the country? Thank you.
Kanita, the number 3.
Thank you very much. Just on a question of clarity, the assurance that between the 17th of December and the 13th of January there will be no load shedding, is that premised on anything? Is that provided certain things happen? You talk about being more proactive and this the effort to get 5,000 megawatts into the system. Is there any costing? Can government afford 5,000? The efforts to get 5,000 more megawatts? And in terms of the indication of sabotage, is the system so at risk that someone can just switch off, a button and the rest of the country face the type of situation that it did? Is it as vulnerable as that? And if there's a diagnosis of sabotage, is there anyone that has been, has the President been informed if anyone has been suspended or held accountable for that? Thank you very much.
Okay, let me start off with Mr. Creamer's question. In relation to oh yes, you're trying to help me with a better pen.
It's a right one.
Yes, okay. In relation to generation and also leading up to something like the IPPs. In relation to the IPPs, the Minister of Minerals and Energy is going to be examining the issue of the IPPs. We have, if you know, bedded down the fourth window, and there are a number of applicants in relation to a further window. The Minister of Minerals and Energy will deal with that. And we obviously are dealing with the issue, we have to deal with the issue of generation and deal with it in a way where we increase the capacity that our country needs. And the main challenge is obviously the aged fleet. Some of the power stations have to be decommissioned, and they are just too old. And the plan to decommission some of those power stations is obviously being looked at. But the main problem that we have is having to keep on maintaining those aged power stations. They cost more money. They actually are so old that the original equipment manufacturers themselves no longer have those parts in the system. So if anything breaks, you basically have to manufacture the part that has broken down, and which gives rise to the challenges that we then have in relation to generating more energy from those plants. And the plan that we have is obviously to keep maintaining them to the extent that we can, and also ensure that we revamp them as much as we possibly can, with a view of generating more energy from them. And Samkelo raises this question almost tongue-in-cheek, asking what have we done in relation to energy generation. Has the chair of the Eskom board, the interim chair of the Eskom board, as well as the minister, have they failed the nation? And we are able to say as the Deputy President did say, that we apologize to the people of our country for what has happened in relation to the load shedding that we went through. And coming here to Eskom means that we ascribe a great deal of importance to our efforts to address the challenges that Eskom is facing right now. And of course, we're focusing on energy generation. Energy generation, my dear Samkelo, is something that we have addressed. We addressed it through having a new build. Kusile and Medupi are the new energy generators, the new fleet, but they've had design challenges that have been given rise to by the original equipment manufacturers having either misdesigned certain parts of those power stations, and that is being addressed on an ongoing basis. And obviously, we are hoping, and we know it will happen, that those 2 power stations are going to generate sufficient energy as to be able to offset what we will lose out when we decommission the power stations that are too old. So our government has actually been working to ensure that Kusile and Medupi comes on stream, and by next year, around June, Unit 1 of Medupi will be on stream and will be able to generate enough energy. And some of these problems are the teething problems that those 2 power stations are going through, and we're hoping and working towards ensuring that in the end they do operate at their optimum level. Right now, our system is not operating in terms of the energy availability factor at the optimum level. We want the energy available factor to have reached 75%. It's round about 68% now. So once the challenges that Medupi and Kusile are addressed and everything is being done to address those, we will be able to have an energy available factor which is at a higher level. You talk about shenanigans and taking decisive action against those who are responsible for this. Yes, of course, decisive action in the end would mean that people have to be charged, people have to face charges, go to court, and that obviously has to be dealt with by your criminal justice system, the prosecuting processes. That is the decisive action that obviously needs to be taken in that regard through those institutions that have been set up to do precisely that. And at the board level and at the management level, we have said, yes, we want people to be accountable. We want people to be made accountable for their actions. The next question, Ms. Hunter, is about have we been able to cost this additional, generation that will be required? That is in the process of being done. It's a matter that has been suggested by Eskom itself, and it is a matter that we are going to examine and take a view on. And obviously, with this, we will also be looking at the issue of self-generation, which Mr. Creamer also asked right at the beginning, and I missed answering that one. We obviously have received a number of applications, Mr. Creamer, from those who want to self-generate. And in the light of where we are now, and in the light of all these applications we've received, we're going to get Cabinet to look at this matter closely so that we can take a decision in that regard. You asked, am I disappointed that in the light of the IRP having been recently approved in October, are we disappointed? Of course, with the current load shedding, we are disappointed. But the IRP has efficacy, and it is an IRP that is robust, that is going to lead to the restructuring of the architecture, energy architecture of our country, and it will be implemented. Now, Ms. Hunter, you wanted to know about the sabotage. That could this have had such a huge impact? If you look against the fact that it was 2,000 megawatts, no, not such a huge impact. Clearly not. However, it came at the time when we were having all these problems and just added to the many other problems. But on its own, it would not have really sort of sunk the system. So I'd like you to look at it in that context. But I think it is important for all of us to note that there are certain people within the system who take it upon themselves to go and switch off certain instruments that finally lead to us losing so many megawatts. Have we suspended those people? Investigations are underway, and we've urged management to speed up those investigations so that those who are found to have participated in this act of sabotage, because that's all it can be classified as, that anyone who would go out of their way to go and disconnect a particular instrument and lead to the loss of 2,000 megawatts over a 10-hour period cannot be involved in any other activity other than sabotage.
As indicated, ladies and gentlemen, the ministers will be available after this briefing if you need any further clarification. So I'm taking the last round. Do I have 3 hands here? Ma'am, you're the first. Okay, I'll take both Alex and the gentleman, then you'll be the last. In that order, you can go first.
Thank you. Mr. President, it's Mariam Yusuf from Mining MX. You mentioned that it would take 5,000 megawatts to stabilize the system. Now, realistically, and I'm sure you've asked Eskom this question, realistically, how long could it take us to get to this point? And will the grid be unstable until then? It sounds like a very long-term plan. And my other question is, do you have any idea of the motives of the saboteur? And has this kind of thing ever happened before?
Thank you. Number 2.
Mr. President, it's Diabo Seto from SABC News. I'm here, Mr. President. It's Diabo Seto from the SABC News. I wanted to find out about how we can begin to preempt the economic impact of these last few days that load shedding has had on an already fragile economy, and how government plans to respond on it. We already know that the economy is really not doing well, and having these last couple of days is going to put a lot more pressure, particularly on the fourth quarter GDP. Is that something that perhaps you have thought about? And going back to what my colleagues have been asking about the sabotage, so during the week we've been getting the issues of wet coal, and now we're talking about sabotage. Yes, you did mention that it was only 2,000 megawatts that has been, but we really need to know the real reason. We're starting to get confused. Was it wet coal or was it sabotage? And the evidence, or is it just at this moment just suspicion that it could be sabotage? Thank you.
Alex Winning from Reuters News Agency. One of the central pillars of your economic policy is attracting more investment, both domestic and also foreign. How can you sell South Africa as an investment destination if the power supply is so uncertain, and the Eskom executives and yourself are saying today that this problem is likely to persist for some months at least? How do you market South Africa in that environment?
Last question, sir.
It's connecting Njanja with Daily Maverick. Mr. President, I don't know if I should congratulate you or criticize you for coming back from Egypt.
Choose something in the middle.
You should have stayed there, sir. Because you have not given us any solution at this point. You are, with respect, sir, you are merely repeating what Jabu Mamuza next to you has been saying since he became chairman. You are repeating what Pravin Gordhan next to you has been saying since he became Public Enterprises Minister. We had load shedding in November 2018, and Mr. Gordhan cancelled leave. You have cancelled leave today for Eskom's executives. And I asked at that point, what is it going to help? We had load shedding in March. We have had load shedding now, again, I think in September. Your government and predecessors have been apologizing to the nation and have been crying sabotage since 2007 about the same issue. A more ambitious president, with respect, would give us a deadline and say, we will give you new additional capacity of this size by this date. Can you take the nation in your confidence and show some agency and tell us exactly when will you give us additional capacity that is not currently in the plan? Everything you have just said, Eskom has been telling us for the past 12 years, only the faces keep changing. Have you asked the private sector to come in with money and build power stations, baseload and renewable for Eskom, in order to make sure that in December 2020 you are not standing there having returned from yet another country and apologizing for load shedding, like the government has been doing since 2007? Thank you.
Let me start with you, Sikonati. Next time I go overseas, I'll take you with me. Let me start where you've just ended. Yes, we've had load shedding for quite a number of years, and indeed, even previous presidents have apologized to the nation. But the key question you're asking, when are we going to provide additional capacity? Now, we built Kusile and Medupi. That is additional capacity that we have provided to the nation. Much as it has taken much longer and it has cost more, the fact of the matter is Kusile and Medupi, and Ingula, by the way, have added more capacity to our grid. And with all the units coming on stream, it's really going to make the grid much more robust. And we've also realized, of course, in relation to climate change and all that, that we've also got to rely on another source of energy, which is renewables, which we have taken bold steps in inaugurating. And in fact, we would be the leading country on our continent to have embraced renewables, and right now those renewables are standing us in good stead. And that is additional capacity that we have added to the grid. Right now, a clear proposal has been put on the table, and there are a number of applications from, yes, the private sector, who have been saying that we want to self-generate. We want to generate, and in the end, what they don't use, they will be able to put or sell into the grid. So that is a matter that is now going to be discussed, my dearest Sikonati Manchancha. It's going to be discussed at the Cabinet on Friday. And with a decision that could flow from that, we could well have additional capacity that will be coming from a number of sources. And we've embraced, in our IRP, we've embraced a mixed energy source landscape or architecture, where we have said, yes, we're still well endowed with fossil fuels, which is coal-fired power stations, much as they are no longer the favored power stations or energy generating sources, and are no longer so well favored in terms of being financed by the banks and everyone. We still have those types of fleets. And we have put in place Medupi and Kusile, but we have also said that we are going to be going, yes, for other sources of energy. Renewables, gas is another great possibility for us to look at. And those are going to be adding quite a lot of strength to our energy architecture. I could say, Mr. Manchancha, that this time round, I think we have reached a stage where we will be able to have a new path in relation to our energy generation, because in relation to the request that has been put forward by Eskom that they need more capacity, that capacity could come, and I'm answering the question that I think Ms. Marian Beso raised at the beginning. That capacity could well come through your floating energy sources. Other countries have used it. I know for a fact that Ghana has been able to utilize a floating energy source where ships come in and they plug into their grid. Obviously, we need to look at the costing of that. And if we were able to do a cost-benefit analysis and arrive at a conclusion that it is doable, it will boost our energy capability or capacity. So all this is being looked at, and it's not like we're just sitting back and not looking at various energy sources that can lift the grid in our country. So we are going to be focusing on that. Now, the lady from SABC asked that there have been excuses that have been given that, yes, there's been sabotage and wet coal. What is the actual situation? Now, in terms of just exactly what happened through the process, I will ask Mr. Mabuza to give us the more granular detail. But all I will say is that the sabotage happened in a way where we lost 2,000 megawatts. The wet coal also led to the loss of some of the efficiency of our boilers. So all that was a combination. And the sabotage is by no means the only factor that led to the load shedding. And I want to make that very clear. It was just an additional element of it all. And she also asked, how can we preempt the economic negative impact? How are we going to be able to deal with the impact it will have on our GDP? And obviously, energy plays a key role in the economic life of our country. And when factories and mines have to shut down because they don't have enough energy, it has a negative impact. And already it's being suggested that if this persists, it could well lead us into a recession. Now, we are taking all these actions to forestall that. And that is why we've insisted that there must be an emergency recovery plan that is going to make sure that we restore stability to the network. And that is going to be done so that we do not have a catastrophic situation that is going to have a negative impact on our energy. Now, the gentleman from Reuters didn't state his name. How can we attract more investments into our country? And of course, we have been saying to would-be investors that some of the challenges that we face is energy. And we've been pretty upfront, pretty open and honest about the challenges that Eskom faces and efforts that we are putting in place to address that. And it is within that type of narrative that people have been able to say, at least you are honest, you are being upfront, and we are still willing to see South Africa as a conducive and a profitable investment destination. Obviously, the more our energy is challenged, the more we will not be able to get investment. But we are working and doing everything we can to make sure that we do have sustainable sources of energy. So with all this, I think we are going to reposition ourselves and make sure that Eskom does achieve its objectives. And I'd like to say that now I think the challenges that Eskom is facing at the operational level, we're going to deal with much more rigorously. We've given the board clear directives of what needs to be done, the management as well, and ourselves as well at the cabinet level. We will be taking a number of initiatives, including what I have alluded to do precisely what Mr. Manchanta was saying about additional capacity. Yes, it is all about adding to the capacity that Eskom is having. Now, let me conclude by saying we're not the only country in the world that is dealing with challenges of energy. Many other countries around the world are having to deal with this, and even more developed economies. And we are now at a point where we obviously have to deal with the full architecture of our energy. We've had to be dealing with the financial aspect of where Eskom finds itself, and we now also have to deal with the operational to make sure that the grid is stable and we have an efficient grid. And with that, I believe that we will have some success. And I'd like to assure the people of our country that government is keeping a very, very strong hand on this, and we are going to make sure that the energy in our country is secured and that Eskom plays the role that it can play. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We'll come back and deal with that. Could we please allow their excellencies, the ministers, Mr. Mabuza, thank you very much for being here. I know that you have to take the president out, and Mr. Mabuza has assured me that he's going to come back and respond to any other fact. Yeah, the Eskom generation team is also here to deal with some of those technical issues, the numbers and the granularity the President was talking about. Thank you very much, sir. Eskom Moza. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and also for your patience. Much appreciated.
All right, so that was the media briefing that the President held with the media at Megawatt Park. That's the headquarters of Eskom, just north of Johannesburg, and saying a number of things. And in and amongst those, so thanks very much for staying with us. He talked about sabotage, he talked about cable theft, he talked about a management that was not agile and treating issues with the urgency. And I just wonder, with that as a kind of a backdrop, what did you pick out from what he said? Do you feel safer and inspired that they're managing the situation?
I don't believe from the presentation that the President has just given that the nation can say that they are any wiser, that we are now given the confidence that the lights will be on and will stay on, and that there is actually a practical plan that is in place to really ensure that we do not have continued rolling blackouts as we have been going through. If anything, I think it's lamentable that there's really been more of positive platitudes from the rostrum without any practical implementation plan. And for him to express that he still got faith in the board is beyond me, because the board has amply demonstrated over the last 2 years. I think I made this point many times. In fact, on the 21st of January 2018, I authored an opinion piece following the appointment of none other than Mr. Mabuza to the important position of chair of Eskom, that he needed to let the board to do a number of things. And they've done neither of those. So it doesn't surprise us that actually they're in this
where we need to have it. So we apologize for that. In terms of sabotage, the power station is Tutuka. The group exec for generation will give a little bit of detail in terms of exactly what has happened and how we detected it and how we dealt with it. So if it's okay. Then there was a question on the contractors, which I didn't fully pick up. So are we going to take any action against them? If you can just help me on that one, please. Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we do have some defects at both Medupi as well as Kusile. We have now agreed with the contractors and contractor specifically on the boiler side that the aim now is to fix and stop the blaming. We believe it's latent defects. The contractor believe, the way that we operate to maintain, the plant and the coal we use is a counter argument. However, we successfully agreed now between the two parties that let's have the focus, and the focus is let's fix it. And then in parallel, we will run a commercial process. So the focus is to get the plant to operate, and in order to get the capacity available for the country. While the commercial process, who needs to pay what, and if there has been any shenanigans, so to speak, we will deal with that. So that is a parallel process on both sides that we will follow. So it's not a question that we will just leave it. So we will follow that through. But the focus, I'd like to repeat myself, is to get those power plants to perform the way it was intended and designed for. The question on do we export any power? We have contracts with ZISA that we have signed, and we also have signed with ZESCO, ZISA of Zimbabwe and ZESCO of Zambia. And yes, we do export specifically to Zimbabwe at this point in time. I don't know if we've started with ZESCO, but I have signed the contract about 2 weeks ago. But I need to make it very clear, it is non-firm power. It is important to understand. If Eskom need the power, we don't provide power. We don't export power. So it's important to understand. So the contracts have been signed as non-firm. Then the truckers. There's the question, is there any truth in the fact that we had load shedding because we didn't sign in time the coal supply agreement, the contracts to transport the coal? That is not correct. We had delays in signing the transport, the haulage contracts, but it had in no way an impact on the load shedding as we had it, as well as on stage 6 load shedding. As a matter of fact, I believe that our primary energy department within the generation division has done a sterling job in the last year to take the average stock levels from an alarming 22 days to the 50, I think when I looked earlier today, to just under 53 days. So we have sufficient stock and coal. I think Becky, if you can just come and deal with the issue of the sabotage and just give a little bit of an update on exactly what has happened. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Good afternoon, everyone. Also, from myself, apologies for what has happened this week. Just to touch on the incident that we have had in one of our power stations in terms of tampering with some of the protections on the boiler. We have established, we've got the instrument around the boiler that monitors the flame in the boiler too, so that when you lose the boiler, it takes out the protection, should trip the boiler as a part of the protection against explosion, so that you don't introduce the coal when there's no fire on the boiler. So what we've picked up after we've lost 2 machines at the power station is that was some tampering because we found that because these monitors are cleaned continuously by the air, so that air that is fed to these flame scanners was then disturbed, and then the boiler did not see the flame or the protection, then it trips the boilers when the flame is not detected. It's part of the protection of the boiler as well, that when the flame is not visible, it must take it out automatically from the system.
Okay, let's take another round of questions. Lisa, Terence, and okay, and over there. Go ahead, please.
Lisa from Business Day. Just to the President's point that management could be more proactive, do you agree? And if so, how can Eskom management be more proactive? And then just on the 5,000 megawatts breathing room that you need, do you have any preference for what energy source that might be? If it's proposed that it were all renewables, would Eskom be okay with that? And that's it.
Terence Creamer, Engineering News. Also on the 5,000 megawatt supply gap, I just want to understand what assumptions Eskom has used to come to that number. For instance, what assumption are you now using for your energy availability factor from the old plant? What assumption are you using for the run rate at the new units at Medupi and Kusile? And why is the gap now grown from 3,000 to 5,000 since the RRP was published? And lastly, linked to Lisa's question, what realistic options are there in the short term to close that gap without blowing the budget?
Thank you very much, Connie Tante from the Sunday Times. Just a follow-up on a question I asked the President was what has allowed the President to announce that from the 17th of December to the 13th of January there will be load shedding? What has changed, and what will be the state of the grid from now until next week, Tuesday? Thank you.
I can give my colleagues some breathing space, or myself breathing space, and my colleagues can talk. Proactive, do we agree with what the President said? That goes without saying. So obviously we can, if you really go back and you think about what has happened, can we do things better? Can we do it different? Obviously, we need to go and assess and see how can we do things better. So I sincerely believe that we have room for improvement. So we will now go, as soon as we're back to normality, which we will deal with just now, we will go and do a thorough study, in-depth study on what has happened, what we could have done better. But yes, we believe that we could have done things better. So absolutely. The 5,000 megawatts, I think I need to spend a bit of time to just say where the 5,000 is coming from. The 5,000 is not, at this point in time, calculated, we've run a model or whatever the case, no. Where we're coming from as Eskom management, the leadership, saying we have a system that is constrained. It's a system that we have neglected. It is a system that is unpredictable and unreliable. So this is where we find ourselves, and we've got to get out of here. And currently, if you look at the demand of the country, it means that what we have available needs to produce electricity. So we don't have the luxury to take a unit out and to put it here and then to properly maintain it. If it takes 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, then that's what we need to do. We don't have that luxury at this point in time. We take a unit out, we do what we quickly need to do, and we bring it back. And I need to qualify what I mean by maintenance. When we talk about maintenance, it is not just purely, if you take a vehicle, if I may use, to take it outside and you replace the brake pad and you bring it back. That's not all we mean in terms of maintenance. What we also mean is, If you look, our average, as the President has said, the average age of our coal-fired power plant is 37, 38 years old. So the midlife, they are past midlife already. And we have to do some midlife refurbishment. So it's not only the brake pads that you need to replace. Maybe you need to also replace the timing chain on the engine. Because if you don't do it, then you bring a unit back that the engine is not safe moving forward. So this is where we're coming with what we call capacity relief. We believe that we need a relief on having whatever we have available that it's producing electricity. That we have the opportunity to do the maintenance, which includes mid-life refurbishment of our units, and that will take time. And we have just used, at this point in time, a figure of 5,000. So we're in the process now to really go back and say, what can we promise the country that we will have available 24/7, every day of the year, of the month, every day of the month, every day of the year. And let's assume, and I don't want actually to say it because just now then they say this is what the CEO said, but let's use, say, 25,000 megawatts. If we say to the country we've got 25,000 megawatts, so we will use whatever we have more to maintain our networks properly. And as and when we bring it back and we have then more permanency and more predictability and reliability in these units, then we can say to the country, we don't have 25,000 now, we have 26,000. So that's where the 5,000 was coming from. So at this point in time, we haven't quantified it exactly. So it means if we need to take 5,000 away for the economy of the country and for the demand, we need 5,000 somewhere else. So this is what we're referring to. Then there was a question. I hope I've made that clear. So we haven't quantified it properly at this point in time. From an Eskom point of view, so how do we believe we can contribute to this? Now, we have open-cycle gas turbines at Ankerlig, as well as in Garikwa, Mossel Bay, as well as Atlantis. So they open cycle. So we're now in the process, my team, to look how soon can we, to prepare a business case. Let me rather do it this way. I've asked him to prepare a business case on what does it mean, or what will it mean, how much will it cost, what will the positive spin-offs be, what must the fuel be, if we convert the existing 14 open-cycle gas turbines to 14 combined-cycle gas turbines. But if you go to a combined-cycle gas turbine, then you need gas. So part of the business case should be, where do we get the gas? At what price are we going to get the gas? What does it cost us to do the conversion? So there are a lot of things that we need to consider. But this is what the team is in the process doing. So this is what Eskom will do from our side to see how we can assist in with this gap of capacity. I'm going to ask Becky, because he's done a thorough model, and he had a good look on how can we from leadership give that confidence and commitment that we will not have load shedding from the 17th of December up until the middle of January. And we've done a lot of homework on how this recovery should happen and how it will happen. Please, Becky.
Thank you, Jan. I think let me start to say, amongst the units that we have lost since last week, we have now put the program to bring them back into the system. That's what we are currently busy with. So towards the end of the week, most of the units that were down a bit for boiler tube leaks, those were affected by coal incidents, so we are busy bringing them back. And then on top of that, as you'll recall, we started with our major summer maintenance from July, August this year. So most of those units now, we will be starting to bring them back. So some of our big units at the power stations like Matimbas and Letabos will be coming back as well from next week. So those are also part of our reliable units that will help us then to stabilize the grid. And then while we are also continuing with the maintenance for the second cycle of this summer period. But those that are coming back, they will give us that stability. Like in the middle of January, we will also getting back Kobe Power Station unit that has been on outage for refueling. So those are the typical units that are very robust once they are back onto the system. And then once Kobe is back, the network as well to the Cape, it becomes more strengthened that area as well. So the units that are coming back from the refurbishment that we started around August, and the ones that came off last week, be it for Chuplix and all of that, we are starting to return them to prepare for that period and also preparing for the winter period as well. So that's what we based our prognosis for this period of this festive season. Thank you.
If I may, I would like to get the comments from our system operator as well, Bernard Magoro, that he also given an update on exactly the question on how confident we are. Please, Bernard.
Yeah, what is important to keep in mind is that we are still in the recovery mode. I think as Becky mentioned, there are a number of units that are continuing to come back. That is why we have been able to step down from stage 4 yesterday to stage 2 today. So Monday is when we will be able to get back to 9,500 megawatts of breakdowns. That at least gives us a little bit of comfort that the system is stable. Before we get to that point, we remain very much vulnerable. So that is why the 17th is a very, very important day. But I must also mention that we are heading towards the weekend. Demand drops, and depending on how quickly the units get back. So Monday is not necessarily the day that load shedding will stop, because I don't want us to be misquoted that we don't know what we're doing if suddenly things change tomorrow. So generation is doing all they can to bring these units back as soon as possible. So it may happen that load shedding stops or we reduce the stage between now and Monday. That all depends on how quickly we can get these units back. But as we stand now, Monday we should be able to be back to 9,500 breakdowns, and that gives us stability that at least the system will be manageable. Thank you.
We'll take a last round, if that's okay. Let's give you, and then Sikonati, and then Diabo. Amanda will come back to you as well.
Bernard Magoro said there will be no load shedding until March. 3 weeks later, we're in load shedding. In September, after Eskom told us there would be no load shedding, 4 days later there was load shedding. Why should you believe, what should we believe you guys this time? I've got a question for the board, and Neliswe Makubane is here so she can help us. Does this board actually believe the information that it is getting from the executive team? Thank you.
Okay. It's Diabo Seto again from the SABC. I just needed clarification. Mr. Oberholzer, you mentioned that the power station concerned with regards to Sabotage is Tutuka, right? Is it still 3,600 megawatts that it's of installed capacity there, where we have lost 2,000 of that? And so far, how much has been recovered? Is it still that 2,000 capacity is still gone? I mean, that's a big chunk from one power station to be gone. And I also wanted to find out on your open cycle gas turbines, how much diesel have you used ever since the beginning of this load shedding period, and at what cost? And the blown up substations across the country that we see in different suburbs, I can imagine that they are beginning to become repaired. Can we expect that repair system or process to impact on the system trying to get back online while you try to sort that out? And yeah, that's it.
I don't know if you want to kick off with Sekonati's questions, and then we can hand over to Jan again.
Sekonati, we do make decisions based on the information we have at our disposal. And the information we've been having, or rather we're getting from the executive management, we have no reason not to believe it. However, there was a statement that was made by the president that we have got to do things differently. So we need to make sure then that whatever management has been doing means it's not working. So we need to make sure then that they start doing things a little bit differently. And also the president indicated that he wants us to act with rigor as a board in order to avoid any more load shedding if we can.
Let's talk, how did we get to stage 6? I think that's important. Leading up to stage 6, we have on breakdowns lost in excess of 10 of the generating units because of the unpredictability and the unreliability, of which for half of those it was due to boiler tube leaks. So whenever you lose a unit on a boiler tube leak, you need 4 to 6 days before you can return it. So it's quite a lengthy outage. So I would like to start with that the issue of rain, which I'll be coming now, was just adding to the problem that we have. The problem that we have is the unit that is unreliable, unpredictable, and that we've lost due to breakdowns. So that is the main cause of leading up to the load shedding stage 6. What is added to the problems that we had initially was the fact that we had excessive rains in the Mpumalanga area, where the majority of our coal-fired power plants are. Just as an example, Kriel mine, the open cast mine, we had floods. It was flooded, the portion that was actually supplying coal to Kriel power station. So we didn't get any coal from the mine for some time on Monday. So we had to close down 2 of the Kriel units, 2 of the 6. We had to reduce the load of the other units because we didn't have any coal. Then we had some floods, severe floods at some of our power stations. To name a few was Camden, Tutuka itself, as well as Kendal, which obviously made the coal handling extremely challenging. Now the question is, but you have been saying so long that you, and Sekonati, I suppose it deals with one of the questions, you've been saying how long that you are in the process dealing with the situation when it's going to rain and that you're going to deal with the coal, that you have some coal available. Now, the teams have identified the power stations, the critical ones, 8 of them. We have successfully compiled strategic stock levels, that you have in excess of 10 days coal. So that means you get the coal, you compact it, and make sure that when it rains, you know that you can get inside. But because of the excess or the rain that we had, the excessive rain, when the existing coal was wet and we had then to revert into the strategic stocks, so when you break that shell that's been compacted to get to the dry coal, as soon as you take the coal out and you move, when you turn back, it is as wet as the others. Just to give you an example, at Camden, I think, I think it's 180 millimeters of rain fell in a period of a few hours, the same amount that usually falls in the whole summer period. So we had really excessive rains. And I can stand here, Sugunati, without having any difficulty saying if we did not prepare for rain the way the teams have, we would have been in a tight spot, a very tight spot. So whatever we put in place did pay dividends for ourselves. And I think then the last issue. So remember, we've got this the units unpredictable, unreliable. So we've lost a number of units. Now we had the excessive rain. That was about 4,000 megawatts contributed to this situation. And then we lost the cable feed to the 2 inclines at Medupi power stations. So you had 2 11 kV cables feeding electrical boards, and from there you fire up the conveyors taking on the inclines, taking the coal into the bunkers and then into the power station. So we lost that. Also on Monday. So it was just the perfect storm that happened on the Monday. So we lost one of the units at Medupi, and we had to bring down the other units tremendously because there was no coal. So that, and then during the day, because of what has happened, we've used extensively our emergencies, water as well as diesel. And I think it was early afternoon, we had a good look at whatever is happening. We said we're going to run out of, if we carry on this way, run out of emergencies, which we cannot afford. So that's when the decision was made to implement Stage 6. So I decided to give you this whole background, what led up to the Stage 6. And the following day, which was yesterday, we were, when we started recovering in terms of the units that returned successfully back to service, that we've dealt adequately with the floods that we had, and getting Medupi back online, it was possible to go back to Stage 2 load shedding. So I just wanted to make that very clear, Marion. I hope it's answered your question. The timing of the 5,000 megawatts, I cannot stand here. I don't know if there's any one of my colleagues here that would like to comment on that one. It's a difficult one. What do we do up until we have the 5,000 megawatts? And I think it deals with your question as well. Don't we need to bite the bullet and say, let's go for load shedding? We are discussing a lot of alternatives and options at this point in time of what you've tabled is one of the options that we are considering. So we haven't finalized on that. But we need to get soon with a solution on the table how we're going to deal with this issue. Because the country needs 30,000 megawatts on average. And if Eskom say, but we would like only to give 25, so where's the 5,000 coming from? So it's a situation that we're struggling with and that we are talking continuously about, and we will come forward with a solution and a proposal, we believe. Okay. Tutuka, I'm going to leave for you, Becky. You can deal with that issue on what has been recovered to date. On the diesel account, geez, I'm glad the CFO is not here. Obviously, the last 8 days, I would guess, 8, 9 days. But yesterday we didn't burn diesel. Today we haven't burned diesel. Obviously, we had to burn diesel to be able to supply capacity to the public, and and the country is large. If you ask me how many liters of diesel we've burned, I'll be lying if I'm saying to you so many thousand liters. I don't know. I really don't know, because I've been a bit busy the last few days, so I don't know. But we will soon look. But obviously we've burned a lot of money, so which is undesirable. So unfortunately I cannot answer that question. Do you want to take a stab on that one? Thanks, Bernard.
From Monday the 2nd until Sunday the 8th, we burned about 100 gigawatt hours of diesel. We haven't reconciled the money because there's different power stations that are supplying diesel power. But the gigawatt hours is 100, Skonati. Maybe I can use this opportunity to clarify as well. What we've always said is that the system remains vulnerable. Up till now, we have never planned to load shed. However, because of the volatility of the system, we do end up in a situation like where we are now if we lose more units like we did last week. We lost 10 units between Sunday the 1st and Thursday the 5th of December, which led to load shedding to be implemented on that Thursday.
Thank you. Let's deal with the blown up substations. Both of these two substations, it happened outside Eskom's area of supply. But I would like just the mic there to pass it on to Monday, please, our Group Executive for Distribution. So the one that was at Richville, it was in Tshwane, and the other one was in Gauteng, here somewhere in the Rand. I don't know exactly where, but please, Monday, if you want to deal with those ones, please.
Thanks, Jan. Yeah, I think you are right. Both substations are outside of Eskom's area of supply. Yeah, we do have, however, sit with the similar risks. We are taking the necessary precautions. I think I think that's about as much as I can say for now. Thank you.
So I don't know about the maintenance in these areas of supply, so I cannot comment on that. We will come to that one. Do you want to deal with that one now? Please deal with that one.
Thank you, Jan. I think maybe the question was relating to say, is that what took us to stage 6 load shedding? I must say that Tutuga losses happened before the first load shedding on Thursday last week. And we have managed to return all those units over the weekend as well before the incident of the second of the stage 6 load shedding at Tutuga. And we must also stress that we are still investigating this sabotage incident with relevant security structures. So once we have confirmed, then we will then have a better view. But the load shedding, like Jan also indicated, it was a culmination of a process of those 10 units, and then this one, that's when was the start of it. It was not one incident from one station that has resulted into this. But we have recovered all those units currently as part of our recovery. All 5 units at Tutuga are running except the one that was on an outage. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Sigunati, let's answer then your questions, because I on purpose decided to leave it till the end, because it's important questions that you've asked. I would like to remind us all that the last load shedding we had before the winter was on the 23rd of March of this year. And we then said to the nation on a media briefing that it's going to be a tough winter. There are 26 days of high risk that we may be going into load shedding. However, we do have, during winter, however, we do have a 9-point recovery plan that we are working extremely hard on. We have leadership as well as management, as well as our colleagues doing the work, really committed to do exactly and ensure what the plan is saying, and to make sure that we are able to fulfill our mandate to the country, and that is to provide sustainable electricity. We went through winter without load shedding. But I am the first one to say there were days that we were extremely close. So I'm not going to lie about that. But we managed to pull through. Then I think it was the 4th of September, Sigunati, that you said that there's going to be no load shedding. I don't believe that's what we said. What we said at that media briefing, it was that if we can keep the unplanned losses, the UCLF, as we call it, below 9,500 megawatts, the risk for load shedding is low. However, if we move to 10,500, the risk increases, and anything above 10.5, the risk is real. So that's what we said. Obviously, we tried our best, to maintain and to keep it below the 9,500. Unfortunately, it wasn't possible. So it is not that we've lied at all, and that I would like to make very clear. Unfortunately, we found ourselves a couple of weeks ago that we were in excess of 12,000 megawatts, so that's why we had to load shed. And just for your benefit, when we had to move to stage 6, we were 17,000 megawatts on breakdowns or loss. It's not available. So the question is, why should you believe us? I stand here and can say without any hesitation and without any doubt, yes, you can believe us because we are sincere. We're honest and we are sincere. To fulfill our mandate, my colleagues sitting here next to me, we're all in the operations 100% committed to fulfill our mandate to the country. Because we fully understand the huge responsibility, and we take accountability, make no mistake. All of us are taking accountability for where we are. And we take accountability to make sure we get out of this. Because that's what the country depends on. So you can believe us if we say we are trying our best. We are not lying at all. If there's one thing that I'm sure you've noticed since I've been exposed to the media, is I've been absolutely sincere and honest and transparent. And I will continue doing that. If we are making a blunder, I will tell you, we apologize we've made a blunder. But I will not stand here. And if I don't stand here, that's another thing. But while I'm standing here as a Chief Operating Officer of this company, to say to you, we're trying our best. And we will continue trying our best. Because it's no use blaming what has happened in the past. You're going to get nowhere. We know where we are, and we've got to get out of it. And we are committed, sitting here, to do exactly that. Okay. So I hope I've answered your question, Sigunati. Okay. Sorry, ma'am.
Clarity, Mr. Ngumalo. You said that the incident at Tutuka happened last week and was restored by the weekend. So how then is it attributed to the reason why there was stage 6 load shedding? So if it was solved by the weekend, how then did the President say that that was one of the reasons why we had stage 6 load shedding?
Yeah, I think if you look at the events, what happened to Tuga units that we talk about, they lost them on Thursday last week. So, which was then part of what Jan said and Bernard as well, that during those periods we were already using too much of our reserves. So, and I think Jan explained it very well what happened on the weekend coming from Sunday to Monday when we had stage 6 load shedding. On Monday that we had a mine belt at the Kriel power stations. The mine belts that got flooded by the flood. Then you couldn't supply coal to the power stations. And then on top of that, Medupi, which is where we lost about 1,900, again on Monday, where we lost those 2 inclined conveyors that supplies Medupi power station. So, and then coupled with that, there were still units that were on the boiler tube failures that has not returned as yet. And then one unit also at Usile, where we had a leak on the generator, a hydrogen leak, which we needed to repair. it hasn't been returned as yet. So although Tutuga unit returned, there were other units that has not returned as yet.
So the sabotage was not linked to stage 6 load shedding?
I think, like we said, we can't link one incident from one power station to load shedding that has happened, or stage 6. Because each unit that is not on the system, it means then more reserves are also deployed. So it's a contribution of all those units, all the 10 units that we have lost last week. They've contributed, because then it means then at peak hours we're using more of the reserves. So it's not what I said. It's not one station that. If it was one station that, even if we lose the whole station, we would have. But because of the number of units that were off, plus what happened with the flooding, especially a station like Camden, which was completely flooded. So then all of that contributed to the stage load shedding. It's not one station incident that has resulted on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Yeah, to answer your question, very simple. Yes, it has contributed.
Our executives are available after this briefing if you have any further questions. Thank you all. The media center remains open if you need to finish off filing for the day. Thanks. Yeah, there was CNBC that wanted to do something with you. He's over there. I just want to check the time. CNBC Africa, it's TV.
All right, so we're going to come out of that now.